The winter wind scraped across the Montana plains like a blade dull with age but persistent in its cutting. The year was 1967, and Malmstrom Air Force Base lay still under a pale sky, its chain-link fences dusted with snow and its concrete structures echoing the hum of guarded secrets. Deep beneath the surface, where the light of day never reached, First Lieutenant Robert Salas sat behind a steel desk, his fingers drumming absently on a manila folder. The capsule's fluorescent lighting buzzed softly overhead, blending with the quiet hum of machinery. It was a silence that wasn't quite silence, the kind that gnawed at the edge of a man's thoughts. Salas wasn't alone. Across from him, Lieutenant Walt Jameson monitored the status board. Each glowing green light represented one of the 10 nuclear missiles under their watch. The screen blinked a dull reassurance. All systems normal. "You ever wonder," Jameson said suddenly, not looking away from the board, "if these things really work the way they say?" Salas looked up. "You mean the missiles?" "Yeah," Jameson said, half smiling. "All this underground circuitry, wires thinner than fishing line, and somehow it's supposed to keep the apocalypse on a leash." Salas smirked. "I'd rather not think about it." Above them, far above, the launch facility slept beneath a clear night sky. But not everything was asleep. It began just after 8:30 p.m. The red phone rang. Salas snapped to attention. "Launch Control, Salas speaking." The voice on the other end, an enlisted security guard from topside, was trembling. "Sir, something's outside, in the sky. It's hovering." Salas leaned forward. "A helicopter?" "No, sir. It's not a chopper. It's just hanging there, glowing red, silent." "Keep your post," Salas ordered, masking the sudden chill that crept into his spine. He hung up and looked at Jameson. "We've got a visitor." The capsule's air seemed to grow heavier in the minutes after the call. Salas found himself listening to the buzz of the overhead lights as if they might change tone and betray some hidden truth. He looked to Jameson, who had stopped joking entirely now, his eyes scanning the board as if expecting a red light to blink out of turn. Then it came again. The phone. Salas snatched it up. "Sir, it's still there," the guard whispered. "It's not moving. It's just watching us." "Watching you?" "I think it knows we see it." Salas's jaw tensed. "Describe it." "It's disc-shaped, glowing red, but not like lights. Like the whole thing's made of fire behind glass. No sound. Just floating. Over launch facility echo." Salas looked to the missile status board, all 10 still green. He tried to keep his voice even. "Are you armed?" "Yes, sir. M16s. "Do not engage. Hold position. Keep your men alert. Report any movement." "Yes, sir, but..." "Sir..." The line cut out. Salas stared at the receiver. A thin, high-pitched whine began to creep into the room. Jameson flinched. "You hear that?" he asked. Salas nodded. "Feedback?" "No, it's something else." The lights dimmed for half a second, then the board changed. Missile 3 red. Missile 7 red. Missile 5 red. Salas and Jameson rose in unison, eyes locked on the display. "What the hell's going on?" Jameson whispered. One by one, the missiles dropped offline. 10 strategic warheads rendered inoperable. Disabled, silently and instantly, by something that hadn't even touched the ground. "Security breach?" Jameson offered, his voice rising. Salas was already flipping through procedures, his hand shaking. "There's no breach. Nobody's inside the perimeter. This is impossible." Then the power flickered again. A low hum began to rise from the capsule's walls, an electrical vibration that seemed to crawl into their bones. And somewhere above, in the freezing dark, the red thing waited. A single overhead bulb buzzed violently, flickering on and off like a stuttering heartbeat. Salas stood frozen in the capsule, a sweat forming cold and clammy at the back of his neck. Jameson was leaning toward the console, pressing buttons, trying to bring the system back online, but nothing responded. Each missile showed the same blank, dead-eyed stare. No go. "This isn't a glitch," Salas said, his voice low. "No kidding," Jameson snapped, panic creeping in around the edges of his control. "Failsafes don't drop 10 birds all at once." The silence that followed was deeper than quiet. It was as though the underground walls were holding their breath. The phone remained dead. Salas glanced at the manual emergency phone, an older, hardwired line. He picked it up. Static, just static. Then a pulse. A sound so subtle it felt more imagined than real. Almost like whispering. His eyes widened. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Jameson paused. He nodded. The whispering wasn't coming from the phone anymore. It was coming from everywhere. Through the walls, through the wires, like voices crawling along the capsule's veins. "I think we're being scanned," Jameson whispered. Salas turned to him slowly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Jameson said, his face pale now, "I think they're looking inside. Not just the machines. Us. Up top, the guard, Airman Nolan, stood motionless near the security gate, his weapon lowered, his mouth agape. The red object hovered no more than 50 feet overhead. It emitted no beam, no visible force, but he felt pinned by it, as though his thoughts were being turned inside out. Behind him, another airman began muttering to himself. "Not supposed to be here, not supposed to be here," the young man repeated. His voice was thin and childlike. "Eyes forward," Nolan snapped. But his voice came out strangled. The object pulsed. Back in the capsule, Salas sat back down and stared at the board. "It's not Russian," he said finally. Jameson didn't respond. "It's not Chinese. It's not a test. Walt, what if it's not human?" Jameson's silence was answer enough. Then, without warning, the power surged. Lights blazed back into brilliance, and the phone screamed to life, ringing sharply through the capsule. Salas snatched it up. "Launch control!" The voice was different this time. Older. Unfamiliar. "They're inside," the voice said. Salas blinked. "Who is this?" "They're already inside. You can't stop it. You can only remember." The line went dead again. "What the hell was that?" Jameson asked, his face drawn. Salas didn't answer, because he wasn't sure if he'd really heard the call, or if it had been something else entirely. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was listening. By 9:07 p.m., the silence had settled like a thick wool blanket over launch facility Echo. Outside, the red disk still hung over the icy ground, casting no shadow, emitting no sound. But something had changed. The guards weren't moving anymore. Nolan stood stiffly at the security gate, his face slack, his weapon dropped into the snow. His breath came in short, quiet bursts. The other airman had sat down in the snowbank, boots stretched out, whispering gently to himself. Their radios crackled occasionally, but neither man responded. Inside the capsule, Salas stared at the board as if willing it to blink back to life. It didn't. All 10 missiles were still offline. Each indicator light dimmed, each system unresponsive. And no one was calling. No one was coming. "We need to report this up the chain," Jameson muttered, pacing now. This is unprecedented. 10 ICBMs shut down without breach or command. You understand what that means? "I do," Salas replied, voice steady. "But you saw what I saw. This isn't mechanical." A silence grew between them. Finally, Salas continued. "What if it wasn't just the missiles?" Jameson turned sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if it's us next?" There was a low vibration in the walls again. Not quite a sound, more like a feeling. A resonance, almost like the heavy stillness before an earthquake, when everything in your body knows the ground is about to shift. Suddenly the blast door shook, not violently, just enough to notice. Both men turned to stare at it. The security locks held firm. No breach. But the feeling that something was just outside lingered. Jameson backed away. "There's no way anything could be down here. We're sealed." Salas didn't answer. He walked to the metal bench along the wall, opened the secure drawer, and pulled out the emergency logbook. He clicked his pen and began to write. 2,109 hours. All 10 missiles went no-go. External visual report of unknown aerial object. Communications disrupted. Possibly psychotropic effects on topside personnel. Object remains in position. No known breach, but presence felt. Unidentified voice over secure line. He hesitated, then wrote one more line, beginning to feel watched. Then something knocked, a slow, deliberate tap. Not from the door, not from any wall, from inside the capsule. Jameson's face went white. "You heard that?" Salas nodded. They turned in unison toward the far corner of the capsule near the electrical conduit panel. The room was perfectly still, but a shape had begun to emerge from the shadow there, like smoke curling into form. A figure, tall, narrow, featureless, its head gently inclined. Neither of them moved. The lights flickered again, and when they steadied, the figure was gone. Salas stood motionless for a long time before speaking. "I think it wanted us to see it." The minutes stretched along in the capsule. Time, once measured in duty shifts and countdowns, had begun to unravel. Salas checked his wristwatch again, 9:14 p.m. The same time it had shown 5 minutes ago. Or had it? Jameson sat slumped against the wall, eyes darting toward the corner where the shadow being had appeared. His hands were shaking, but his voice remained flat. "We need to activate Echo Protocol." Salas didn't move. "You heard me, Robert. We declare an emergency and lock out the capsule. Full isolation. If they try to open that door from topside, we don't let them in, not even if they're wearing uniforms." Salas still didn't speak. His eyes were focused on the dead missile status board. He could see his reflection in the blank glass. "If we isolate," he said slowly, "we assume the threat is coming from outside." Jameson turned. "You think it's already in here?" "I think it never needed to come in." Salas moved to the auxiliary terminal and keyed in the sequence to initiate Echo Protocol. The keyboard responded sluggishly, as though typing through molasses. Lines of green text populated the monitor, greater than initiating Protocol Echo, greater than lockdown engaged, greater than emergency comlink offline, greater than personnel biosign monitoring active. The last line caught his attention. Personnel biosign monitoring. He hadn't activated that. It was an automatic subsystem only used for internal medical emergencies. The screen blinked again. Greater than 3. Signatures detected. Salas's throat went dry. He and Jameson were the only ones inside the capsule. He turned to look at his companion. "You seeing this?" Jameson was already staring over his shoulder. 3, he whispered. They turned together, scanning the room. It was just them. And yet, the air had grown warmer somehow, more charged. And there was a faint metallic smell in the room now. Ozone, blood and copper wire. Like the inside of a machine that had once been alive. Then a second terminal lit up. They hadn't touched it. Lines of code began to type themselves out. Like a ghost at the keyboard. "We see what you fear. We see what you guard. We see what you hide." The power cut for 2 seconds. Then came back. Everything had reset. The board was green again. Every missile glowing bright and ready. As if nothing had happened. But Salas knew something had. Systems don't reboot without prompts. Missiles don't return to go after a total shutdown without a technician's hand. Jameson whispered, "What if it was a test?" "A test of what?" Salas murmured. "To see how far we'd go before we broke." They stood in silence. Then the main phone rang again. Just one ring. Salas reached for it, but the receiver lifted on its own and dropped to the floor with a sharp click. The dial tone bled into the air, long, low, endless. He picked it up slowly and held it to his ear. No sound, only a feeling like something breathing on the other end. The capsule's air had grown heavy with static. Invisible threads hummed across the room like the aftershock of an earthquake. But there had been no tremor. Not in any traditional sense. Something had ruptured, but not the earth. Salas rubbed his temples. He felt a pounding at the back of his skull, dull and rhythmic. Like a thought he hadn't yet had but already regretted. Across the room, Jameson was curled on the bench, knees up, whispering something under his breath. Salas walked over. "Walt?" Jameson didn't seem to hear. His lips moved slowly, eyes fixed on the floor. "Walt," Salas said again, kneeling. "Look at me." Jameson's eyes turned toward him, and Salas felt a jolt of unease. They were glassy, blank, not vacant, but too full, like someone else was looking through them. "Do you remember the beach?" Jameson asked. Salas frowned. "What beach?" "Cape Charles, summer of '58. We saw the lights over the water. You said it was just lightning." Salas swallowed. "We never went to Cape Charles." Jameson blinked slowly. "You said it was just lightning, but it hummed, and it came up from beneath the water." Salas stood up, backing away slightly. Something was wrong, not just with the room, not just with the equipment, with time. He turned to the main terminal. The clock had reset, not to 0, but to 3:33 a.m. And the date, March 24th, 1971, 4 years ahead. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He clicked into the system logs. There were entries, dozens of them. Report logs he hadn't written, debriefs, system tests, psychological evaluations, all under his name, and a discharge order. Subject, Lieutenant Robert L. Salas. Status, medically separated. Condition, dissociative neurological disorder. Cause, unexplained incident at launch facility Echo. He stumbled back, hands trembling. "This isn't happening. This didn't happen." The terminal blinked again. New text appeared. "It already did, you just don't remember yet." The door console clicked loudly. An alert. Request for entry. Level 2. Security override. No one should have access, Salas breathed. We're in Echo Protocol. No overrides from topside. None. But the screen showed otherwise. The override had been accepted. From within, the door began to slide open with a grinding groan, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. And then, a voice. Software feminine. Familiar. "Robert," it whispered. He turned, startled. "Mom?" he said before he could stop himself. But no one was there. Only the echo of a memory that didn't belong to this place, or this time. And just beyond the capsule's steel threshold, something waited in the dark. Not an intruder, not an enemy, a mirror. The corridor outside the launch capsule stretched on like a tunnel carved from sleep. The overhead lights were out, leaving only a sickly green glow bleeding in from the capsule's emergency strip lighting. Salas stepped toward the open door, heart hammering in a strangely detached way, like a drumbeat in someone else's chest. The name that had left his lips, Mom, still echoed in his mind, though he hadn't thought of her voice in years. Behind him, Jameson hadn't moved, still curled on the bench, still whispering. The corridor was silent. No guards, no movement, no noise. Salas took a cautious step forward, his boots brushing loose dust. The hallway walls looked older than he remembered, peeling in places, water-stained, almost like no one had maintained this facility in decades. The third biosignature. It had to be out here. "Hello?" he called softly. "Is someone there?" Nothing. Then, a flicker, just at the edge of the corridor, where the light met the dark. A shape, not a figure, a silhouette, barely formed, like a hole burned through the world. He stepped closer. "I saw you." The shape shifted, not away, toward him. And as it neared, the air grew warm. The metallic tang returned, this time mingled with something else. Ozone and something deeper, something organic. Then the shape spoke, not with a voice, but with a memory. He was 15 again, running down the hall of his childhood home in San Bernardino. His mother calling out from the kitchen, the smell of fresh bread. But it wasn't a memory he had summoned. It had been given to him. "No," he whispered. The shape advanced, and each step brought another cascade. Moments from his life, not just relived, but rewritten. A time he had never gone to college. A version of himself who had drowned as a boy. A timeline where he had never joined the Air Force. Versions of him, layered, parallel, shimmering like oil on water. Then from behind, Jameson's voice rang out, not whispering this time, but clear. "Don't follow it." Salas turned. Jameson was standing now, eyes wide, his body stiff. "They feed on futures," he said. "On choices. They don't move through time. They consume it." Salas staggered back into the capsule, away from the shifting shape in the corridor. "Then what are they?" he asked. Jameson's mouth twitched. "They're not invaders. They're editors." The corridor darkened again. The door hissed shut behind them with a groan like a coffin lid. Salas leaned on the terminal for support, trying to breathe. Then the computer lit up again. One line. "Do you want to know what you are?" He stared at it for a long time, and then typed, "Yes." There was no response. Only the power failing once more, plunging them into full darkness. And the sound, faint, from the walls again, of something shifting in the circuitry. A breath that wasn't theirs. Total darkness surrounded the capsule, but it wasn't silent anymore. The hum had returned, not from the systems, but from within the walls, like electricity straining against its conduit, or whispers bottled under pressure. Salas sat in the dark, eyes wide, heart slow. The question he had asked, "Do you want to know what you are?" still lingered in his mind, though the machine had offered no reply. Jameson sat across from him now, unmoving again, but not afraid, resigned. "It's always been like this," Jameson murmured. "The system just forgets." "What system?" Salas asked. But Jameson didn't answer. He just stared at the emergency bulkhead as though it weren't a door anymore, but a window. Then, click. A soft, rhythmic tapping began to echo through the room. 4 taps, then silence. 4 taps again. Morse code? Salas counted it out. ... Pause. ... Not Morse. Not a message. A heartbeat. The emergency lights flickered on for a moment, long enough for Salas to see the capsule had changed. It wasn't the launch room anymore. Not entirely. The consoles were still there, but the walls were wrong, like they had been replaced with something smoother, older, faintly organic, as if the room were being overwritten by another structure entirely, another memory, or another truth. A thin vertical line split the back wall. Then it opened, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. Not part of the capsule, not part of any base on Earth. It glowed with a soft amber light, pulsing slowly like a breath. Jameson stood. "We're not supposed to see this part." Salas followed him in. Inside was a vault, silent and endless. Floor to ceiling, translucent cylinders stretched upward into darkness, stacked with perfect symmetry. Inside each one, a person, or a version of a person. Some were frozen in mid-motion. Some had their eyes open. Some looked exactly like Salas. "What is this?" he whispered. Jameson walked slowly between them, his voice hollow. "Every path we didn't take, every action not chosen. They don't disappear. They're archived, preserved, watched." "Watched by who?" Jameson turned to him. "By us." Salas's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "You're not just you, Robert. You're a junction, a spine. You're one of the ones who notices. And they don't like the ones who notice." Salas moved closer to a nearby pod. Inside was a version of himself in civilian clothes, older, standing at a chalkboard in a classroom. A teacher. Next to it, another version, younger, dressed in a silver pressure suit, floating in zero gravity. An astronaut. A third, Salas in a hospital bed. Hooked to machines. Still, empty. He turned to Jameson again, but Jameson was gone. In his place stood the red glow. It didn't float now, it stood. It had shape. Tall, impossibly narrow, without features. But the feeling of a face burned into Salas's mind. The red shape raised a hand, not to strike, but to offer. Behind it, all the other pods lit up at once. And somewhere deep in the vault, a low tone began to rise, ancient and mechanical, like the sound of a dying star. Salas took a step forward. "I remember now," he whispered. The tone pulsing through the vault wasn't just sound. It was instruction. It vibrated in Salas's ribs, pressed behind his eyes, unlocked doors in the deepest chambers of his mind. Not memories. Those were only shadows. These were permissions. He saw the red shape more clearly now, not with his eyes, but with something older. It wasn't a being, not in the way we think of beings. It was an interface, a translator. The tip of something vast, complex, and utterly indifferent to the lives it catalogued. "You're a witness," the shape said, not aloud, but across his bones. The room around him shifted. The vault melted away. In its place, a field of endless black, dotted not with stars but files, columns, layers, interlaced timelines, spiraling outward like webs of crystal data. Each one a version of Earth, each one a ledger of decision. The voice came again. "You were meant to forget." He looked down. His own body was transparent now. his skin laced with shifting circuitry. Not metal, but thought, wrapped in threads of potential. You were allowed to remember, for a moment, the voice said. Long enough to report what you saw, long enough to spread the idea. Then you would forget again. Most do, but I didn't forget, Salas whispered. No, said the voice. You fractured. Now the images returned, not in fragments, but in full. March the 24th, 1967. The actual moment. Salas had watched the red object from below, not through camera feed, but through his own eyes. He had been granted sight, not just of the ship, but of the field around it. A webwork of invisible architecture surrounding the missile base, ancient and unseen. Some kind of grid or vault meant to hold potential. They weren't just guarding Earth, they were collecting its forks. And when the missile shut down, it hadn't been sabotage. It had been a test. Could humanity remain stable when witnessed? Would its agents react with terror or transcendence? He saw his own face that night, shocked but calm, asking the right questions, not shooting, not fleeing. You passed, the voice said. So we let you carry the memory. In pieces. Salas breathed heavily. Why show me now? The field shifted again. The capsule reformed around him, rusted and dark. He was back on the bench, alone, but not quite. Jameson was there again, with something wearing his face. Because you're close, it said, smiling thinly. To what? To them. The voice tilted its head. The others like you. And now Salas saw. He wasn't the only one. Across the globe, scattered like stars in fog, there were others who had seen. Some in flight towers, some on submarines, some alone in their bedrooms, looking out windows at the right moment. They're waking up too, Jameson said. Then the final truth came, quietly, gently. You're not protecting missiles, he said to himself. You never were. Jameson nodded. You're guarding us. The systems in the capsule lit up, clean and alive. All 10 missiles. Go! Salas stood. He felt older somehow, but lighter. The red light had faded. The shape was gone. Only one word remained on the terminal screen. Remember. The soft hum of the capsule returned, gentler now, like an engine winding down after a long journey. The emergency lights had dimmed, casting the room in a honeyed glow. Salas stood in the stillness, breathing evenly, as though waking from a dream whose details refused to scatter. No alarms, no red lights, only green, steady, blinking in slow rhythm. Across from him, Jameson had resumed his post. He sat upright, calm, alert. You all right? Salas asked. Jameson looked over. You were gone a while. Salas paused. You remember all of it? Jameson smiled faintly. Only what they let me keep. The capsule creaked softly, the sound of steel adjusting to silence. Salas sat down at the desk, the leather seat warm from his own return. Before him, the system logs were pristine, routine. No alerts, no failures. As if the incident had been scrubbed from the machine's memory, but not from his. I saw the vault, he said, barely above a whisper. Jameson gave a slow nod. Most never see that far. How many versions of us do you think are out there? Enough to make this one matter, Jameson said. Salas leaned back and looked up at the low ceiling. He felt hollowed out, and somehow, as if the space inside him had been cleared of noise and left room for something older. I used to think the job was about control, he said, making sure no one ever launched the end of the world. Jameson turned his chair toward him. And now? Salas closed his eyes. Now I think it's about witnessing, about standing at the threshold and not looking away. Outside, the wind had returned to the Montana plains, brushing across the missile silo like fingers turning a page. The snow continued to fall, quiet and slow. No red lights, no alarms, only sky, only cold. The phone rang one last time. Just a single chime, almost like a knock. Salas didn't answer. He didn't need to. The moment had passed, but its echo would remain. From deep in the earth, beneath metal and frost and decades of secrets, a single man sat watchful. Not over warheads, but over possibility. And far above, on the darkened horizon, a light blinked. Not red this time, blue, brief, and then gone.